So I'm here to talk a bit about the practice of studios filming in foreign locations. This is coming from a Hollywood perspective where the studios are American-based companies, where despite America having a wide variation of available environments, finding places to film outside the States is often necessary, usually to do with the location itself, and often to do with the people who will be working on the project. These are very complex things to put together that require a lot of planning and coordination on things like transportation, shipping, scheduling, safety planning, and one of the biggest as far as studios are concerned, how much it's all going to cost. Because at the end of the day, it usually all comes down to how much of the studio's money is being spent. A specific film to investigate this subject in a bit more detail is one that is a personal favorite of mine, that being the production of this film had a lot of stress and hardship revolving around finding the actual shooting location in the South African country of Namibia. I am taking most of my knowledge about this shoot from the oral history book Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, The Wild and True Story of Mad Max Fury Road, which is a collection of first-hand accounts and interviews from cast and crew members, writers, artists, mechanics, producers, stunt coordinators, and the director, George Miller himself. Originally, it was intended that Fury Road be shot in Australia, as the first three films have been. Even though financially backed by American Hollywood production companies, this made the most logical sense. Writer-director George Miller, along with many of the companies and other people who will be working on this film, were Australian-based, and the whole film will be eligible for tax rebates from the Australian government. There was one big problem. Even though the wide perception of Australia is that it's an open, expansive desert, turns out it can be pretty hard to guarantee it won't rain. Looking ahead a bit, when production was actually planning to start, they were looking at the main location of Bunker Hill, a city in Australia, when it actually had its first rainfall in 15 years, which also happened to be at record high levels, flooding the area. With all this going down in Australia, the team was forced to find another location, which the book described that they basically looked at all the deserts in the world. Of course, America was considered heavily, the Nevada salt flats being near the top of that list. It did become pretty clear to the studio that filming in the States was just going to be too expensive to be viable. This was due to reasons that included, but was not limited to, the 9/11 attacks causing a collapse in the US dollar to the Australian dollar, losing the film 30% of its budget and causing Fox to pull the plug on the movie completely. When the film was picked back up by Warner Brothers, they still deemed it to be too expensive to be filmed in the States. By this time, Miller and the crew had already been looking at the African country of Namibia, but I do want to discuss how this decision affected certain casting choices for the lead role of Max. Early on, the original actor Mel Gibson was of course considered. One of his stipulations is that he wanted it to be filmed in the States. The second actor who had similar stipulations for being filmed in the States was musical artist Eminem. Of course, Tom Hardy would eventually be cast, and as an unstable, post-apocalyptic, folktale, wasteland homeless crazy guy, I think he did a pretty good job. Technically speaking, the studio wasn't very keen on approving the shooting in Namibia either. To quote the book directly, the studio very clearly said, "Look, we're not going to Africa. That presents too much risk." Doug Mitchell's answer to that, more or less, was to put all the vehicles on a boat and to send them to Africa, but he failed to tell the studio that before the boat had left the port. And Namibia itself gave the crew their fair share of problems, one of which being weather. Of course, no rain, but sandstorms proved to be a pretty big issue. Many of the vehicles needed to be modified to be able to hold up in a much sandier environment than was originally intended. There were also a lot of problems trying to keep film equipment safe. The thing about the Namibian desert is that the sand has a high concentration of metals and silica, which can be really damaging to electronics that have gotten inside. And the weather in the region subjected everyone to extreme heat, and in the cases of needing to film scenes where everyone is drenched in water, freezing cold. While in Namibia, the cast and crew also had to worry about crime. There were multiple break-ins to the home set up for the actors, and those who went to the only town nearby were targets for stabbings and muggings. Security was increased, and people were advised to travel in groups. One story told is that while visiting the one bar in the town, the bouncer attempted to steal a crew member's jacket, and while trying to get it back, he found himself surrounded by 20 War Boy stuntmen, as well as one of the stars of the film, Nathan Jones. I just want to point out to everybody that this man is 6'11". Imagine you're trying to rob somebody and just... They got the jacket back. One other thing about the filming in Namibia is that the Australian government approved for Miller and the production to still apply for Australian tax rebates on the film at 40% for qualifying expenses. But despite that, the film still found itself over budget and at the end of its allotted shooting schedule, while still needing to film the ending and beginning scenes. But with the studio seeing the potential of what they had already filmed, the team found themselves with the extra time and budget to finish the movie, earning around $38 million at the box office.